the British monarchy. For over 1,000 years, it's been a symbol of stability, tradition, and magnificent ceremony. We see the gilded carriages, the waving crowds, and the stoic figures on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. This is the history we know, the carefully polished story of duty and destiny. It's a powerful image, and it's designed to inspire a bit of awe. But what if that public facade, the one so meticulously maintained for centuries, is just that, a facade? What if, behind the curtain of pomp and pageantry, there's a hidden history? A history of explosive secrets, devastating betrayals, and shocking scandals that were deliberately buried. What if the history we've been told is a carefully constructed lie? Because the truth is, the course of British and indeed world history hasn't always been shaped in the halls of Parliament or on the battlefield. It's been twisted, broken, and completely rewritten by secrets kept within the palace walls, hidden alliances that decided the fate of empires, personal crises that sparked religious revolutions, and succession plots so audacious they feel like they're ripped from a novel. Today, we're pulling back that curtain. We will uncover the royal secrets that were never meant to see the light of day and reveal how these hidden truths didn't just shake kingdoms, they changed the very course of history. Our first secret takes us to the early 20th century, a time of massive global upheaval. At the heart of European royalty were two cousins who could have easily been mistaken for twins, King George V of Great Britain and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia. Their mothers were sisters. They holidayed together. They wrote to each other affectionately, with George calling his cousin Nicky. Their resemblance was so uncanny that at a wedding, even their own relatives got them mixed up. This was more than just a political alliance. It was a deep, personal, family bond. So, when the Russian Revolution exploded in 1917 and Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate, it seemed natural that the Tsar and his family would look to their British cousin for salvation. The new provisional government in Russia was actually eager to get the Romanovs out of the country, afraid they'd become a rallying point for loyalists. They formally asked the British government to grant the imperial family asylum. And at first, the British government agreed. A rescue seemed just around the corner. But then, a deafening silence. The offer, once extended, was mysteriously and crucially withdrawn. The window for escape slammed shut. The Romanov family was moved from one house to another, their fate growing more uncertain by the day, until that horrifying night in a cellar in Yekaterinburg in July 1918, when the Tsar, the Tsarina, and their 5 children were brutally executed by a Bolshevik firing squad. For decades, the official story was a tangle of political excuses, but the secret, buried in royal archives and government papers, was far more personal. The decision to abandon the Romanovs came from the very top, with King George III himself playing a decisive and deeply personal role. The secret is this: King George V chose to sacrifice his family for his own survival. He was terrified. He saw the anti-monarchist wave sweeping across Europe. He read furious letters from his own subjects, who saw the Tsar not as a beloved cousin, but as bloody Nicholas, a tyrant. The Tsar's German-born wife Alexandra was despised in a Britain that was locked in a brutal war with Germany. The king's advisors, like his private secretary Lord Stamfordham, warned him that bringing the Russian imperial family to British shores could spark a revolution at home and topple his own throne. Faced with this immense pressure, George V made a ruthless choice. He urged his government to withdraw the offer of asylum. While other factors were at play, and no country was eager to take the Romanovs, the British refusal, heavily influenced by the king's own fears, was the critical blow. The king, who looked so much like the Tsar, chose to save his own crown rather than his cousin's life. The consequences were staggering. The execution of the Romanovs ended a 300-year-old dynasty and cemented the Bolsheviks' grip on power, paving the way for the rise of the Soviet Union. The entire geopolitical map of the 20th century was redrawn. King George V was said to be haunted by his decision, later writing in his diary about the poor innocent children who were murdered. But the secret was kept. To protect the image of the monarchy, the king's fatal role in the tragedy was obscured. A dark family secret that allowed the House of Windsor to survive while the House of Romanov was utterly destroyed. From a 20th century tragedy, we travel back to the dark and brutal 15th century to uncover one of history's greatest cold cases, the disappearance of the princes in the Tower. This isn't just a mystery. It's the foundational secret upon which the entire Tudor dynasty was built. In 1483, King Edward IV died unexpectedly. His eldest son, just 12 years old, was proclaimed King Edward V. The boy king and his 9-year-old brother Richard, Duke of York, were placed in the Tower of London, which was then both a royal residence and a prison, to await the coronation. Their protector was their own uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. He was supposed to be their guardian. But the boys were never seen again. Sometime in the summer of 1483, the princes just vanished from public view. An Italian visitor in London noted that they were taken into the inner apartments of the tower, and then sightings became rarer and rarer until they stopped completely. What happened next was a political earthquake. A clergyman suddenly claimed that King Edward IV's marriage to the boy's mother had been invalid, making the two princes illegitimate. With the rightful heirs conveniently declared bastards, their protector, Richard of Gloucester, had himself crowned King Richard III. The secret of what really happened to those boys sparked centuries of speculation and propaganda. The official Tudor version of history, immortalized by Shakespeare, paints a simple, horrifying picture. Richard III, the monstrous uncle, had his nephews murdered to secure the throne. For centuries, this was accepted as fact. But the real secret is how the uncertainty of their fate, combined with Richard's ruthless power grab, changed everything. Whether Richard truly was the murderer or not, his actions created a massive crisis of legitimacy. By deposing and likely killing the sons of the previous king, he shattered the stability of the kingdom and gave his enemies the perfect excuse to rise against him. And that's exactly what happened. A little-known Welsh nobleman living in exile, Henry Tudor, whose own claim to the throne was incredibly weak, saw his opening. He rallied support by positioning himself as the avenger of the murdered princes. He invaded England, and at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, Richard III was killed. Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII, ending the Wars of the Roses and establishing the legendary Tudor dynasty. The entire Tudor claim to power rested on this secret. Henry VII's legitimacy was built on Richard III's villainy. The story of the murdered princes was essential propaganda. The disappearance of those two boys was the catalyst that ended one dynasty and gave rise to another, the Tudors, who would oversee the English Reformation and one of the most transformative periods in English history. The fate of two children, a secret held within the tower's stone walls, literally rewrote the line of succession and set England on a completely new path. We all know the story of King Henry VIII and his 6 wives. It's a famous tale of romance, beheadings, and a king's desperate search for a male heir. But if we frame this as just a story about love and lust, we miss the explosive secret at its core. The real secret wasn't that Henry wanted a new wife. It was the radical, world-changing plan he was willing to hatch to get his way, and the deep-seated political fear that drove him to it. By 1527, Henry VIII was in a full-blown panic. He'd been married to Catherine of Aragon for nearly 20 years, and she had failed to give him a surviving son. All they had was a daughter, Mary. In an era where the last female ruler's reign had led to a bloody civil war, this wasn't just a personal problem, it was a dynastic crisis. Henry, whose own father had ended the Wars of the Roses, was terrified England would collapse back into civil war when he died. He became convinced his marriage was cursed by God. His desire for an annulment was then supercharged by his obsession with the charismatic and whip-smart Anne Boleyn, who, unlike other court ladies, refused to be his mistress. She would be queen, or nothing at all. So Henry asked the Pope for an annulment. This wasn't unheard of for a king, but there was one huge political obstacle. Pope Clement VII was essentially the prisoner of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, and Charles V was Catherine of Aragon's beloved nephew. There was no way the emperor would let the Pope declare his aunt's marriage void and her daughter a bastard. The Pope's hands were completely tied. When the Pope refused, Henry had a choice: accept it or find another way. And this is where the truly history-altering secret comes in. It wasn't an affair, it was a coup. Secretly, Henry and his advisors, especially Thomas Cromwell, began plotting something that was previously unthinkable. If the Pope wouldn't give the king what he wanted, then the king would simply remove the Pope from the equation. This was never just about getting a divorce. It was about power. It was a carefully planned campaign to dismantle 1,000 years of religious authority in England. Through a series of laws, threats, and backroom deals, Henry systematically severed England's ties to the Roman Catholic Church. He declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. He dissolved the monasteries, seizing their incredible wealth and land, which fundamentally remade the English economy. And he executed anyone who stood in his way, including his once trusted advisor, Sir Thomas More. The fallout from that decision was permanent and world-altering. Henry's personal and political crisis triggered the English Reformation. It didn't just get him a new wife. It gave birth to a national church, the Church of England, and set the country on a Protestant path that would define its identity for centuries. All of it stemmed from a secret plot, born of a king's dynastic anxiety and his obsession with one woman to take on the most powerful institution in Europe. The secrets we've uncovered so far have toppled dynasties and shattered religious empires. It just goes to show how the official histories often hide the most shocking truths. If you find these stories as mind-blowing as we do, and want to keep digging into the history that was never meant to be told, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Let's jump forward to 1936. The story of King Edward VIII is one of the most famous royal scandals ever, and it's usually told as the ultimate love story. A king who gave up his throne for the woman he loved. That woman was Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American socialite. The Church of England, which the king is head of, forbade remarriage if a former spouse was still living. Facing opposition from the government, Edward chose love over duty, abdicated, and his shy, stammering younger brother was reluctantly pushed onto the throne as King George VI. That is the simple, romantic story the palace and the government wanted you to believe. But the real story, the secret that was deliberately hidden under the cover of a marriage crisis, was far darker and far more dangerous. The secret is this: the abdication wasn't just about love, it was about national security. The establishment wasn't just worried about a divorcee, they were terrified of having a Nazi sympathizer on the British throne on the eve of World War II. Edward had already made his political leanings troublingly clear. He was openly sympathetic to Hitler's Germany, believing Britain should work with the Nazi regime. This was alarming enough, but his relationship with Wallis Simpson made it 1,000 times worse. The government was fielding terrifying intelligence reports suggesting Wallis Simpson herself was a security risk, possibly even a Nazi sympathizer or agent. Leaked dispatches from the German ambassador showed he believed she was a valuable political tool. There were even rumors that the king was careless with top-secret government papers, leaving them out where she could see them. The government, led by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, saw a catastrophe waiting to happen. They had a king who was not only constitutionally reckless but politically toxic. His obsession with marrying Wallis Simpson wasn't just a moral problem, it was the perfect excuse, a golden opportunity to remove a king they deeply distrusted and considered a security risk. The love story was the perfect cover for a much deeper political purge. The consequences of this carefully managed secret were profound. First, it put George VI on the throne. This reluctant king became a powerful symbol of British courage during the Blitz, strengthening the monarchy's bond with the people. Second, it arguably altered the course of World War II. Had Edward remained king, his German-friendly views could have led Britain down a path of negotiation with Hitler, changing the entire dynamic of the war. The Nazis themselves later cooked up a plot to kidnap Edward and reinstall him as a puppet king after invading Britain. And finally, the abdication placed a young girl in the direct line of succession, Princess Elizabeth. The secret maneuvering that pushed Edward off the throne is the very reason Queen Elizabeth II became the longest reigning monarch in British history. The romantic tale of abdication is a fiction. The truth is a hidden political coup that may have saved Britain from a compromised king and ensured it stood defiant against Nazism. For our final secret, we move out of the past and into the shadows of the present day. We tend to think of the modern British monarchy as a purely ceremonial institution. They cut ribbons, they wave from balconies, they're figureheads with no real power. That's the public perception, and it's an image the palace is very happy to project. But what if this is the most effective secret of all? The secret is that the monarchy's relationship with power and intelligence isn't a relic of the past. It's a deep, active, and ongoing reality, deliberately shielded from public view. The connection between the Crown and Britain's intelligence services, MI5, MI6, and GCHQ, is profound. This isn't just about the king getting a few courtesy briefings. Senior royals are not just protected by spies, they are actively involved with them. King Charles III is the official royal patron of the intelligence agencies. He receives the same daily red box of top-secret intelligence reports that the Prime Minister does. Prince William has done work placements inside all three major spy agencies as part of his apprenticeship before becoming king. This isn't for show. This is high-level indoctrination into the deepest workings of the state, giving the monarch a unique and powerful perspective to counsel, encourage, and warn the government with an authority no one else has. And this influence is protected by an incredible legal shield. The royal family is explicitly exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. Communications between the monarch, the heir, and the government remain secret. This allows senior royals to lobby ministers on policy completely behind closed doors, with no public accountability. We know this happens because of occasional leaks like the Black Spider memos, letters from then Prince Charles to government officials, but the full extent of this influence remains a closely guarded secret. The consequence of this secret fundamentally challenges our understanding of a modern constitutional monarchy. We believe we live in a democracy where power is accountable. Yet, at the heart of the state is an unelected hereditary institution that wields an unquantifiable amount of influence in near total secrecy. The greatest modern royal secret isn't a personal scandal. It is the carefully maintained illusion of powerlessness. It is the hidden hand of influence that operates beyond the reach of democratic scrutiny, shaping the state in ways we are never meant to see, from a king's cold choice that doomed his family, to a murder mystery that birthed a dynasty, from a personal crisis that tore a nation from its religious bedrock, to a national security threat disguised as a love story, and finally, to a modern system of secret influence operating right under our noses. The history of the British monarchy is woven with two threads, the one we see, gleaming with gold and tradition, and the one that is hidden, stained with secrets. These aren't just footnotes. These were the turning points, the moments where a single secret decision completely altered the path of a nation and the world. The polished crown is the official story, but the real power, the force that has shaped centuries, has so often been held in the secrets kept behind palace walls. It makes you wonder, what royal secrets are being made right now, ready to change the course of our future? What other truths do you think are still buried in the royal archives? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching.